Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Saving Civilization podcast. Today, we are going to examine authoritarianism. We begin by showing the dire state of democracies today and show that those who elect dictators are often bringing about their own destruction. We define what we mean by this term and then contrast the difference between old school and new school autocrats. Finally, we look at how these regimes start, persist, and end. Recent years have seen the collapse of democracies around the world. Autocratic rulers from the Philippines to Venezuela to Hungary and everywhere in between are gaining in popularity. Is democracy doomed? Are we making the same catastrophic mistakes of the 20th century when we let populist nationalist rulers come to power? We know where that led, to cities in rubble and the deaths of hundreds of millions of people.
Und muss sagen, den Frieden wollen wir, aber diese ununterbrochene Entrückung lehnen wir ab. Und die Entbehrung ertragen wir nicht. Bei Diktaten wirken wir nicht mit. Sie mögen ein Diktat als Diktat uns aufoktroyieren.
This was a rally for Hitler dated from 1933. Now, just a few years later, the results speak for themselves. The ruins of Berlin in 1945. This is what happens when people blindly follow a leader who says he has all the answers. These collapsed buildings could be our future if we fail to think critically. From a psychological perspective, authoritarianism is when a person blindly submits to the rule of an authority. It is opposed to individual freedom of thought and action. From a political perspective, authoritarianism denotes any political system that concentrates power in the hands of a leader or a small elite. The leaders of these governments, if not reined in by constitutional limits, are also referred to as dictators. Eric France outlines several of the characteristics of authoritarianism. First, authoritarian leaders are above the rule of law. In other words, they break the laws of their own country or make new laws that allow them to do essentially whatever they want. Most importantly, autocrats cannot be replaced by free and fair elections. Free elections are those in which most adult citizens can vote, and fair elections are those in which alternate parties are free to operate. The freedom to create opposition political parties in these societies is either limited or non-existent. Early authoritarians intimidated their citizenry through the outright use of force. They attempted to maintain complete control over society by mass intimidation, imprisonment, or murder. These 20th century authoritarians have been called totalitarians. Three key features of these earlier systems were, number one, reliance on a single party; two, the use of a highly developed ideology; and three, a powerful state security apparatus. Examples of these include Adolf Hitler and the fascists in Germany, and Joseph Stalin and the communists in the Soviet Union. Today's authoritarians are different. They maintain the illusion of a democracy and go to great lengths to hide their use of force, both from their own populace and also from other countries. They also don't often emphasize any specific ideology. Modern dictators often maintain control by appointing loyalists to key positions of power, controlling the media, and changing laws to favor themselves. They use this control to tip the odds in their favor, promoting their own messages over rivals, holding sham elections, and making it seem as if their rule is legitimate. Dictators typically do whatever they can to stay in power. This often means eliminating any who oppose them, annulling elections, extending their own term limits, and attempting to control alternate competing centers of power, such as the press, judiciary, Congress, militia, or other political parties. Whereas old school dictators wielded a sledgehammer to get what they want and were overt in their use of force to intimidate and suppress, modern dictators are like puppet masters, cleverly manipulating things behind the scenes to get what they want. Sadly, contemporary dictatorships are longer lasting than their predecessors. This is probably due to the previously mentioned shift in tactics. Most of these regimes are overthrown not by popular uprisings, but instead by rival elites. Dictators must appease these elites in order to maintain control. They thus both fear and placate them. However, this means that government posts become increasingly occupied by do-sayers. The result is that dictators are now cut off from accurate advice, so they make poor decisions. Because there are no checks on their power, they become emboldened to abuse. And since wealth gets distributed increasingly to an inner circle, they become even more prone to corruption. How do dictatorships end? Here we see the bodies of Mussolini and his mistress, Petacci, in a square in Milan. Although we might want to see more dictators meet their end this way, only a small fraction of them end up being exiled, imprisoned, or killed. Unfortunately, many dictators who fall from power never face justice. They oftentimes live on as ordinary citizens in their own countries, enjoying wealth and privilege until the end of their days. Displacements in an autocratic regime can happen either from the inside or the outside. Examples of internal displacement include military coups or resignations. Examples of external displacements are mass uprisings from the general population or rebel insurgencies. Here we see a news clip from the International Crisis Group depicting the military coup in Myanmar on February 1st, 2021.
So a year ago, the Myanmar military arrested Aung San Suu Kyi, President Win Myint, and took power in Myanmar. This came after 10 years in which the military had stepped back and allowed elected civilian governments to run day-to-day affairs while they retained control of the security sector. There was an enormous societal resistance to a military takeover. People's memories were still very fresh of the last military regime, which dissolved in 2011. And so there'd been these 10 years of hope and a feeling that the future would be better than the past. And that was taken away. And so especially young people felt that their futures had been stolen. And so there was resistance. There was concerted nationwide resistance, initially in the form of mass public demonstrations, millions of people out on the streets of Yangon and other cities and towns in the country. The military responded with extreme violence. It has shot and killed more than 1,500 civilians in the year since the coup. And this drove people not to give up, not to decide that it wasn't worth it or that they would be cowed into submission. Rather, it prompted a nationwide resistance movement. People began to defend themselves, to defend their communities, and then go on the offensive. There's also a very strong political, non-violent resistance movement that continues. And so the coup has, in a sense, done what nothing else has been able to do in Myanmar's recent history, which is unite everyone across ethnic lines, across religious divides, across societal divisions. The country is almost unanimous in not wanting to go back to the dark days of military rule. So these broad-based resistance movements and the military look like they will be locked in a violent confrontation for months, if not years, to come. That, of course, is having a huge impact on the welfare of the population. The coup has undone a decade of economic growth. It sent the country back to where it was 10 or 20 years ago, and it's getting worse. But the hope, I think, is that the coup has set off a new politics in Myanmar. The youth of the country are at the forefront of resistance to the coup, and they bring fresh ideas, more open minds, and the ability to transcend some of the deep divisions of the past.
Economic wealth and the possession of natural resources are factors that enhance the stability of authoritarian regimes. This is because dictators can use their wealth to solidify control, appointing loyalists, buying off opposition parties, and strengthening security forces. Economic growth and the development of a middle class also helps prop up dictators because people that might otherwise rebel are satisfied by financial stability. This may be a factor in China, which has grown tremendously in recent years, but never democratized. That's it for now, folks. Thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned for future episodes where we explore the inner workings of autocracies. Also, don't forget to visit our Facebook page and our website containing additional information.